Vulnerability in storytelling inspires a deeper kind of listening, which can challenge the larger systems that don't serve us anymore. Vulnerable storytelling is actually the only thing that inspires lasting change. It also takes safety, and that's vital to this project. Here, there is safety both in anonymity and in numbers, which together create an impact that can reverberate beyond this moment. These three attributes outline a need for a space, a place to share openly without stigmas, guilt, or shame that we're accustomed to feeling when sharing about mothering, or the choice to become one or not. There is a need to share these stories because our reproductive rights to opt in or opt out of motherhood are limited than what they were at the beginning of this year. This gathering is really important. And we're mostly gathered here tonight because of community. We've created a self-identifying motherhood community through storytelling, and now a performance community through sharing, which includes you. Because of this project, I am a braver artist. I am more vulnerable, to feel more safe, and explore my own edges as an artist and as a mother. As a mother, I'm better for it because I know I have community. We have it all right here in this room. And we know that being an artist mother is not novel. It's been done. I think people are doing that. It's possible. But it is not a welcomed combination. The truth is we often feel like we're doing badly at least one of those roles. But the Momologue Collective creates a fusion directly from the friction between the two. One informs the other, and in some ways saves myself from failing at the other. This project is ongoing. There are more stories to gather, more controversial topics to explore together, and deeper bonds to be made. I hope you all will stay a while and contribute and join in growing the parts which brought us all here tonight. And lastly, I'm most grateful for the levels of collaboration that this project has made possible. And with that, Jennifer Norton.
Now I have to go after her. I'm here with you tonight in two capacities. The first as Executive Director of Pier 1 Theater, because it has always been important to Pier 1 that we make a space for and amplify stories which are important to our community, and that we collaborate with other organizations when the stories that need telling match their mission and place in our community. The second, as co-director of the show, because ever since we collaborated with Hospice and Friends of the Library on the Big Read presentation, Mercedes and I have been itching to work together again. We tossed around several ideas, but when the pandemic hit, stories of motherhood really jumped to the front of the line. Not only are we mothers ourselves, like many people, we spent the early part of the pandemic connecting through social media, and we saw these anonymous stories that Brianna was sharing resonating deeply among our friends, and also the sharing of daily struggles of handling kids at home, kids at school, isolation, work from home, and on just came pouring out. And then the question of Roe v. Wade was put before the Supreme Court, and more stories poured out. I wanted to bring these stories to the stage to highlight them, to give them space and weight, and to spend the time getting to know them in the best way that I know how, intimately with a group of actors who will share them with honesty and empathy. So, without further ado, please.
but they couldn't tell me. No one can tell you what it's going to be like to be 10 days overdue, lost in a hazy world of anxiety and anticipation, wanting finally to see your baby's face, wanting to have it over, wanting to have your story to tell. No one will tell you after 24 hours of labor what it will feel like to have your glasses taken off, your arms strapped down to be martyred and sacrificed on a surgical table, blind and feverish, while you hear your baby pulled from your belly with a giant sucking noise. To hear her cry for the first time of many times, and to cry your own tears, your belly empty and detached and very far away.
No one can tell you that you will lie in the hospital bed on IV antibiotics, enjoying your catheter, blissfully unaware. That as your body molds itself around your new precious child, an infection is incubating in your gut, so that by the time you are home, your husband is back at work and people have visited and said farewell. That you will shit mucus and water for weeks, months, for so long that your sisters will whisper behind your back, jealous of the lost baby weight, but you will still be nursing your child, giving her everything that you managed to keep and everything that you no longer have.
No one tells you what your second child will do to you. No one tells you that even though you're determined not to have another C-section, you'll make the appointment anyway. No one tells you that you'll go into labor after you give up control and then realize that deep down you never really had any control to begin with. No one tells you that you will pee your pants in the passenger seat of the car and want to start pushing right there in the hospital parking lot. They don't tell you that you will strip completely naked as you enter the birthing room, only mildly aware of all the other people in there shoving an IV into your arm, telling you to push and then don't push!
They can't tell you that you will think, this isn't so bad, but you don't want to say it out loud in case you jinx it. They can't tell you what it's like to get impatient with pushing, or what it's like to give birth squatting, or to see your own deep red blood flowing down your legs over your tiny monkey baby's body. To climb into the bed, deliver a placenta, ask for a hamburger and a milkshake, and feel high. Not blissfully high, but kind of crazy, selfish high. They don't tell you that the VBAC will be so hard to recover from that every time you sit down to pee, it will feel like your most private, discreet parts are falling out. They will look like badly butchered meat for long after the 6-week mark, when most people have healed enough to have sex again. But you will laugh at that thought.
They don't tell you that your second child will maybe break you and your family. That this beautiful alien will be so tuned in to her toddler sister that she will barely nurse. She'll be swimming in circles by 2 months. And by the time you realize that she's not gaining weight, you will know that it is your fault for being distracted, for being too confident. They don't tell you that every child is so different that everything you thought you knew will not apply, and you will have to negotiate a brand new understanding of how to live.
They
They don't tell you any of this.
They ask, are you so happy?
Are you getting any sleep?
Yes, you answer truthfully.
It's fine.
Even though it's not.
And because it is. They didn't sew my cervix shut.
Something felt wrong. I went to the bathroom and I knew something was wrong. They said my cervix failed. I could feel him when I reached up inside of myself, and when I went to the hospital, they didn't push him up. They didn't sew my cervix shut. The doctor who could have performed the circlage wasn't in on the weekend. By the time I saw a doctor, the baby's sac had contracted bacteria, and my body decided he was no longer viable. So he came out. He was in a little blue tub, still in his sac. But he was gone. They put him in a little tiny blanket that the Catholic Church gives because they knew what was happening, but it was like a death box or a grief box. I don't know what to call it. He was getting enough oxygen to keep his heart beating for almost an hour, but it just wasn't enough. After his heart stopped beating, he wrapped his hand around my finger. I had this out-of-body experience. I was looking down at myself and my body was grieving, but my mind was detached. I felt bad about this for a long time, about not being present in my own body then, about having my son experience me crying then instead of experience me loving him in those few short moments. But he was there because he knew I needed him, or because God knew, or the universe knew, or fate knew, or whatever you want to call it. And the delivery nurse was with me from the moment he started coming out until 4 hours after he was born. Oh, she never left my side. She streamed tears. The collar of her shirt was soaked. I don't know how much it affected her. But the next week, I brought her a rose to thank her. I don't even know if she was there. I just left it for her. These types of losses affect people for a long, long time. 1 in 4 mothers lose their babies.
Mom, you are so beautiful. I gained a lot of weight in my late 30s pregnancies. Nursed 2 babies for a combined 51 months. Both left my body with maps of stretch marks, wider hips, and sagging boobs. Did I mention the leg veins? Oh, the leg veins. Feeling unhappy about these changes after a shower, I sulked naked across the living room to get my clothes out of the bedroom. And on seeing me, my 3-year-old said, "Mom, you're beautiful." His response was unprompted and pure, and it landed right in my center, softening and shifting the way I see my new body. I earned every stretch, sag, bulge, creating and giving life. How could that be anything other than beautiful?
We knew prenatally that my daughter had Down syndrome.
The labor of my second daughter came on fast. On the way to Boston, I almost gave birth on Mass Pike. We did make it to the hospital, and she was born within 2 hours after only 1 push. My husband and I burst into tears upon seeing her strong movements and hearing her fierce cry. We knew prenatally that our daughter had Down syndrome. and a serious heart condition. The entire room of nursing staff and doctors were also crying. They were tears of joy to have witnessed her arrive with such strength and magic. To this day, she brings that strength and magic with her everywhere she goes.
The same woman who counseled me on my abortion delivered my perfect baby boy.
I knew I was pregnant. That's not why I made the appointment at the family planning clinic. It wasn't my first time in this situation. Crying, pregnant, sitting there with the kind of woman who could not change the wild night I had a few weeks ago, or the fact that I took Plan B a day too late. The first time I'd sat in that office with the confirmation pregnancy test, with the big pink plus, I knew what I wanted. That clarity was comfort in a way. The one night stand with the person whose name I can't recall was not the introduction to motherhood I wanted for myself. That decision was easy, and for me, the process of scheduling the medical abortion was relatively easy too. It was harder the second time. Another unexpected positive test due to another careless night and a careless week after when Plan B could have worked. But now I was married and crying at a clinic. I was crying because it was the only place where I would be given the care and information I needed to make the right choice for myself. I had drunk alcohol between the conception night and taking the pregnancy test. Would keeping the pregnancy unnecessarily bring a damaged child into the world, or should I end it now? I was in my upper 30s, geriatric, as according to the OB-GYN terminology, and at increased risk of having a child with genetic abnormalities, which I wasn't willing to handle. I needed abortion as a choice on the table. But this time the choice was excruciating. 9 months later, the same woman who counseled me and referred me for my abortion delivered my baby boy. A baby boy who would not exist and who would not be loved and cared for in the way I can offer him now, if not for the choices I've had.
Look, Mama, a jellyfish.
Our toddler was potty training. Now, like most kids her age, her interests into the wondrous world of the toilet bowl were piqued. Everybody's bathroom time now was accompanied with comments and questions and friendly farewells, down with the flush. Now, since having children, my flow has become much heavier. And on day 2 of my period, I needed to pee, and right on cue, my bathroom broadcaster was at my knees. The bright red gelatinous clots that danced down the toilet pole made the water look like a lively aquarium. I tried to be quick, but she was quicker. She peered into the toilet bowl, and her eyes lit up like on Christmas morning. She said, "Look, Mama, a jellyfish!" It's a big mama jellyfish. She's so pretty. And for a moment, I was completely charmed to stare in awe at my glorious menses with my daughter. Besides, it's always a good idea to smash a few stigmas, especially while we're building towards a more witchy matriarchy amongst ourselves.
Who will hold me?
In my last month of pregnancy, I wondered where my friends were. Busy with their business and not inviting me to their fun. I guess due to my circumstance. Nobody asked how I was doing. Nobody knew how I cried, how scared I was, or about the nightmares I had of my baby dying inside of me. I guess everyone just assumed I was happily waddling through life. Until my due date, then the text started to come. Are you having contractions? Some days the answer was no, in which case they responded, what's up? Are they going to induce you? Sometimes the answer was yes, in which case they celebrated my pain. Confused, the days went on. I waited, wondering in my anxiety and anticipation if anyone would ask, how are you? Then one fateful day, it started. Like a train wreck in my body, it was agony. It brought up repressed labor memories from my first son, even as different as it was. I pushed so hard for 2 hours, my nose bled. I puked with every contraction. My body shook as my temperature dropped. My baby's heart began to race. But finally, with one last push, he was here. And then the people I hadn't heard from for months began to text, when can I hold your baby? And when can I come? What day is it? I thought as I hobbled around, too swollen to move or pee. It won't hold me, I thought as I hobbled. I wondered, thinking of traditional times of families and villages that would care for the mother, a sisterhood of red tent understanding, the 6 weeks of bleeding and crying postpartum. My partner was wonderful in all the ways a man can be. Although he was there, he would never understand where I was. What had happened to me, what I had lost in those hours. I so desperately wanted a friend to ask how I was, to acknowledge the trauma and not just the outcome. I have come to realize many of my friends, these beautiful and strong women, never had a chance or allowance to process their births. Other than reciting a story from the outside perspective. And that I wasn't alone. There was a moment when puking, bleeding, grunting, and pushing that I felt my grandmother's there. Where I was connected to every woman and mother that has ever been.
It was a shock to me.
My baby was an extremely bright baby who slept, on average, 4 hours in any 24-hour period. I was exhausted from no sleep and 3 babies, like a lot of moms. I breastfed him exclusively, but even at 3 and 4 months, he was so distracted I could only keep him on my breast for a couple of minutes before he'd wrestle away from me to see what was going on around him. At 6 months, his tiny little fingers would barely reach the top rail of his crib, yet he could pull himself up and out of that crib, drop to the floor with a thud, and make his getaway. He was walking and running confidently by the age of 6 to 7 months. His athleticism was incredible. This was a shock to me. Later, I watched him struggle in school as the busy work bored him. He quickly became labeled and then lived up to that label of problem child. I tried every resource I had, but I watched this handsome, athletic, gifted child failing to meet society's prescribed expectations. He was such a talented and perceptive boy. Surely he would find a way to fit in, as brilliant and mechanically inclined as he was. By age 5, he mastered the Rubik's Cube. He tore apart an electrical outlet, managed to take apart or put together any other puzzle he came across. And yet every day felt like a struggle. I was desperate to help this boy I so deeply loved, but there was no help to be found. This was a shock to me. In time, he developed into a kind and generous man, despite years of adversity and his inability to meet society's expectation in schools or relationships or his career. He passionately taught others anything that they showed an interest in. He had an insatiable appetite for learning, especially all things mechanical. He and I would spend hours discussing options for design and construction, remodeling and creating. His eyes would light up with his brilliant ideas. It gave us both such joy and connected our like brains. As an adult, channeling his gift was difficult for him, but he most often used his ability to help anyone in need, even if it meant his own obligations were left unmet. He desperately sought reassurance that he was valued. Helping others who were grateful gave him momentary pride in himself. Daily, he still struggled with insomnia and a brain that was so overactive I could see the pain in his eyes. Alcohol became his answer to the pain and spinning. And yet he continued on despite this destructive choice. He fathered 2 beautiful children. Relationships fell apart. He found new ones. Jobs fell apart. He found another one that would entice him with the excitement of opportunity. But things never lasted with this wonderful man. This was a shock to me. February 1st, 2017, the sheriff drove into our yard. He got out of his car and walked up and knocked on the door. As he sat in our living room, he said, "I have some bad news to share. My son had been found that evening. He was dead of suicide by hanging, 3 days short of his 39th birthday." This was a shock to me. We held a gathering of family and friends on his birthday, February 4th, 2017. Hundreds of people gathered to honor him. Everyone talked about how much they loved and respected him. Multitudes told of their gratitude for the endless kind and generous things he had done over the years. Those stories filled my heart with pride. My son chose to leave us and leave behind the pain, never having felt that love, that value, that gratitude that was so apparent on that day. Our society needs to value all people, even if we have to search hard to find their gifts. We need to be flexible in our expectations. We need to love people for who they are, just the way they are. We need to honor, respect, and profoundly care for all people. We have a long way to go in this society. It's all still a shock to me.
I squatted, reached in the side, and
We were interrupted unexpectedly and he bolted out the back door. The phone rings. On the other end was him. He said he couldn't find the condom. What? What do you mean you couldn't find it? I ripped the bed apart, throwing the sheets and blankets across the room. It was nowhere to be found. Oh, God, horrified by the only other option left of where it could be, I headed to the shower. My inner self yelling at me, no, surely it can't be up there. Is it? The water ran over my shoulders as I felt to see if it was, just kind of just up in there, just kind of, still nothing. So I squatted, I reached inside, and slowly pulled it out of my vagina with a long snap. I stared at it. The feeling of being sick to my stomach set in, and then that sort of like nervous laugh kind of thing, like came over me. Oh my God! Holy shit! What the actual fuck? How did it get there? I mean, everything went through my mind. Like, was the condom too small? Do I have a powerful pelvic floor? Did I suck the thing off? Am I gonna get pregnant? I pulled myself together and drove to the store for Plan B. It did not drastically change my life because I was enjoying being sexual. I am very sexual. But who knows if this mishap would have turned into something more? Think modern science and modern medicine for the ability to get resources so easily.
Rage shows up.
Rage shows up.
Rage shows up.
Rage shows up.
When we were already late, and I managed about 45 seconds to run the vacuum, coincidentally, same amount of time it takes for 2 children under the age of 5 to empty a whole bottle of baby shampoo out onto the carpet in my bedroom, Rage showed up.
She showed up that time my youngest hurled her dinner plate on the floor with a deadpan look on her face. This coming after I had excused the mess in the kitchen so I could execute dinner, which was already 20 minutes late because my eldest had had a tantrum that resulted in a wetting accident. Cleaning up piss and hot food at the same time.
And she showed up that day I tried to make the bed. You know how kids love it when you throw out the sheet and it floats down in the bright sunlight. Rage was with me. Every day rage accumulates like little drops in a bucket until it flows over and floods us all. I need to try screaming into a pillow.
The feeling is starting to circle back once every few weeks, and I'm afraid to admit it because I'm not sure how normal it is, but when she's with me, I'm paralyzed. I'm stiff. My throat closes. I can't blink. I see white. But there's no pause button with 2 children in a flood. If I separate myself and shut the door, I can still hear them. And then it's just worse with Mom walking away. For me, having my children internalize Mom walking away feels worse. So I force it directly.
I hold my little but strong daughter's flailing body in arms that are flooded with rage. I hold her tightly, swaddled the way she wants. My body is a rigid container. She is the tender center. At least until she stops the screaming. Sometimes I scream too. I know I'm using my physical strength to dominate her and to exert my control over her, but isn't that what she wants in this moment? Isn't that what she needs? It seems to be the only thing I've found that'll bring her back. It's the only thing I've found that works.
What's worse are the things I imagine during my mom rage. What are these thoughts? Where do they come from? Am I a monster? I don't know what's safe. I don't know who I can talk to about this. We both cry. First her, then me. We talk about it. We hold each other, and we're sorry. Once the baby is born, women have more support, but it still feels like we don't get to choose very many things for ourselves, especially if we're breastfeeding. Women think either my baby suffers or I suffer. So of course we suffer for as long as we can handle it. I say yes to everyone else and no to myself, regularly denying myself and excusing others. I'm learning. Now, when my kid comes up to me and asks me for something, I'll say, I can't right now, I'm busy. Even if I'm just at reading a book. Sometimes I say it nicely. Sometimes I say it differently. Especially if I'm doing something for the good of the whole family. I'll say, do you see me here cooking dinner? Cutting the dog's toenails. On the phone, making a doctor's appointment. Bleeding on the side of the road. Do you see your dad sitting there on the couch? Now go ask him for help. I have more of a choice than I think.
Hear you, hearing you.
We have a funny saying in our home. Hear you, hearing you. It's the not so subtle reminder that your children will repeat everything they hear you say and do, including your mannerisms and your responses. It's a reminder to model appropriately, especially when they're young. Now, as a parent to a 14-year-old and a 12-year-old, I have the fly-on-the-wall experience of listening to them. My son lowers his voice, squares his shoulders, and cracks self-deprecating jokes. My daughter will be the first to talk in a class. She will ask who would like to speak next, has one-on-one conversations with her teacher, points her pencil at the screen, very thoughtful. If it wasn't for a pandemic, I wouldn't have the experience and opportunity to hear them, hearing them, like I did when they were little. And we were with each other all the time, like little mirrors. Now I see them reflecting me less. Instead, they reflect who they have become and who they are becoming. And they bounce their light off the rest of the world. They are a better me than I ever was.
Moaning like an animal and panting in hyperventilation.
I didn't take time to process my resentments about giving birth to my second child for several months after that baby was born. I asked my husband, what was going on with you? Why couldn't you put your phone down? Why did you act like you didn't care? He stated 3 reasons.
I was distracted because I was mad at your mom because she got a headache right when you went into labor, and then she went into her room.
True story, but even more of a reason for him to step up.
What? I thought you were going to have another 30-hour labor. I was pacing myself.
Did And I looked like I was pacing as I was moaning like an animal and panting in hyperventilation.
I think something is wrong with me. And I can only feel joy and excitement when something is novel.
Yes. This is closer to the truth. But there's still something wrong with you.
I've had 5 pregnancies, 1 abortion, 2 miscarriages, and 2 live births.
I was a different person for each one, and after each one. At 25, I was in the throes of alcoholism and drug use. I was homeless and trying to get on my feet. I found out I was pregnant at the end of my first trimester. I was such a wild child that missing my period didn't even occur to me. I took a pregnancy test, and I cried, and I drank. And I had fleeting romanticized thoughts about keeping the baby. But there was no way I was even remotely ready. I got my abortion in the 2nd trimester, and they did not tell me what the hormone drop was going to do to me. I basically went through postpartum depression. It was a mess. I mean, I was a mess regardless, but I was a super mess afterward.
7 years later, in a completely different state with a different fella, I was 10 days late. There's no fucking way I was pregnant. I had an IUD, good for 10 years, and I was only on year 4. When I got that positive pregnancy back, I cried, y'all. I know it sounds shallow, but alcohol and drugs reigned supreme. I was ready to give that up, and I already bought the mushrooms that I was going to do that weekend. But I knew I was ready. I was with a partner who wanted the same thing. We wanted to start a family a few years from now, but oh well. This pregnancy was the first time since I started drinking that I was 100% sober.
After my kid was born, I continued to drink, but not even an inch of what I used to. And I stopped doing all the drugs that I used to dabble with. 2 years after my kid was born, I decided I was done one night after half a drink. It didn't serve me anymore. I didn't like me when I was drinking. Not 10 drink me, not even half drink me. Not a good look, let me tell you. Very chaotic. Would I cry? Would I punch somebody? Would I try to make out with everybody? Would I look for crack? That bitch was too much. She wasn't fun anymore, and I had a kid who would forever and ever be more fun and outrageous than any shot of whiskey or a one-night stand. But what they don't tell you about sobriety is, it fucking sucks. All the coping mechanisms that you had are out the window. You are not only raw dogging reality, but you're staring straight at all the bullshit that caused you to drink in the first place. And that trauma, that keeps that blackout train choo-choo-chewing. Insert therapy here. Insert a million aha and oh fuck moments. Insert self-reflection and self-learning. Insert trying for baby number 2 and insert my first miscarriage. It was one of the super fun miscarriages. The kind where you go around all, yay, I'm pregnant. I feel awful and it's so great. While the baby inside me had stopped growing. My body knows I already have trust issues. Why did she have to do me like that? I was 11 weeks when I found out the baby stopped growing at 8 weeks. Let's just say ugly crying in a paper mask with the ultrasound tech. It's not ideal.
So I had 3 choices. And I chose to take misoprostol to pass the fetal tissue at home. It took forever. The plan was to take the meds when my daughter was still out before she got home. Started as soon as she walked in the door. awful cramps set in. And the rest is the rest. That was hard, y'all. That was super hard to bounce back from. We tried again that December. At 7 weeks, as I got out of my car to pick my daughter up at daycare, I felt this huge gush of fluid. Oh, I knew what was happening. So I put my kid in the car, called my doctor, told me she was very sorry, but there wasn't much they could do. Give them a call if my pad filled up super fast. I went through this one alone. My husband wasn't home. It's just me, my kid, and my tears. You start to feel silly for even getting excited. Like you just made a fool of yourself. Why did I tell even one person I was pregnant? What was wrong with me? Was it me? Was it my husband? Or was it the universe telling me I'm a shit mom and stop procreating?
We went camping that fall and I ate a turkey sandwich. It all of a sudden seemed vomit worthy to me. I couldn't eat it anymore. When we got home, I took a pregnancy test. Anxiety slapped me in the face. You're positive, bitch! Pregnancy is a hell of a lot scarier when you try for it. Really want it. And have had some losses under your belt. But this baby persevered. I went to some dark places during my pregnancy. Some really awful scenarios played in my head. I said daily affirmations to ease the consistent uncertainty. It wasn't until I felt the baby kick that the anxiety eased up and I started to enjoy my pregnancy. Even the really awful parts. My baby was born happy and healthy and with one of the most beautiful umbilical cords I've ever seen. I mean, it was thick, y'all. Oof! Tooting my own horn. My beautiful, perfect older kid has a beautiful, perfect sibling. I am a 100% sober mom. I've had 5 pregnancies. In each one I had a choice. Would I do it all over again? Yes. 1,000,000 times, yes.
My mother is a grandmother now.
She says to me, let's catch up. So I take a deep breath, say, sure, put my book down. But she's already saying, I've been thinking about you lately, about how you're so focused on the negative always. You express anger and even sadness in front of your son. You even name them. But where is the joy? Where is the joy? And I take a deep breath and say, you mean except for the other than the 59 minutes when we experience joy together every single day? And she says, well, I guess he is an unusually happy child. But last week, he had a nightmare. And you let him watch television. And then she says to me, and I'm trying to wheel my feet on the floor, and she says to me, you let him watch television. Wouldn't you prefer to make sure that he goes to bed at my house, in my bed, every night? That way, we'll know that he is safe. And I give myself one last push down, and I say, well, it would be nice not to be so tired for a little while. And she says, why don't you tell him how happy he is, especially when he's unhappy? It will help with his anxiety. And I try not to fly into space, but I feel myself becoming a black hole. And I hear myself saying, because that would be cruel. And she says, this isn't a reflection of you personally, but literally everything in my 30 years of experience and training tell me that you are doing it wrong. And I take a deep breath. And I say to her, this is not an attack on you personally, but I'm a lifelong student of cruelty. And she says, you don't mean that. And I say, I do, and I'm gone.
Sexuality was shameful.
Growing up in a Southern Baptist household, sexuality was shameful. The only option was abstinence until marriage. Even though my family has significantly relaxed their beliefs over time, I don't think I will ever feel comfortable discussing the subject with them. I still struggle sometimes with this deeply entrenched shame related to body and sexuality. When my little sister announced that she was pregnant, I felt immense sadness along with my joy. The sorrow wasn't for her. She has a healthy and happy marriage, is financially secure, and lives close to family. I grieved because I would experience my dear sister's pregnancy only virtually from a great distance. I wished I could be the wise older sister who had been there before and could guide her along the way. I wanted to share stories and commiserate when she talked about her morning sickness. I, too, had constantly felt nauseous when I was pregnant, and I understood what she was going through. Only she didn't know I had been pregnant because I had never told her. Because I had had an abortion. I was very fortunate to have easy legal access in a state where the right to choose is now more restricted. I don't regret the decision I made. I adore my little nephew. And my sister is now pregnant with a second child, and while I don't think that she would judge me for my choices, I am not willing to risk other family members finding out. So I commiserate in silence, holding my secret close.
Grieving something I never had.
After touching base with my new neighbor, I realized I was grieving for something I never had. She was mourning the news of the loss of her fertility. She was kissing her chances of natural motherhood that her newly mothered friends had recently become exclusive about. They made it clear the only motherhood they hold true is the one that involves gestation. She was mourning the loss of her soon-to-be-gone uterus and her chances of bringing a human into the world whose genetic traits might remind her of her mother she lost last year. At the moment, my instinct was to encourage her to focus on how much better she would feel sans uterus that made her feel like a shell of herself. That's what I had done. Of course, I hugged her and said I could be her motherless friend. I shared that my fertility also had to be given up for my own life to continue. And that night over dinner, it hit me. I had never truly mourned my loss. Despite the fact that I never had the desire to become pregnant. It was hard. Yet I found hope in the fact that I do love children. And motherhood isn't just about genes and gestation and pushing and going under the knife. I didn't have to mourn the loss of my own potential to become a mother at all. There were still plenty of chances at that. It's heartbreaking when women promote the idea that motherhood is unattainable without growing your own baby. My friends who held those ideas are gone. And mourning the loss of their friendships is more like a celebration. I choose to birth supportiveness and inclusion. I am fertile and ripe with love and strength that isn't dependent on DNA.
Neither of us felt ready.
We accidentally got pregnant when we got engaged. Neither of us felt mentally, emotionally, or financially ready to have a baby. We weighed all of our options, and abortion was the only one that made sense. If we had kept that child, we wouldn't be able to provide the life we are currently providing to our toddler now. It was a gut-wrenching choice to make, but it was the only choice to make. I can't imagine being in that situation to have no other option but to bring another life into the world. I loathe that my daughter will grow up with fewer rights and fewer freedoms than I've experienced and benefited from. I'll also add that we got pregnant with my daughter while on birth control. We were the lucky 0.1% in that circumstance, I suppose.
Coffee table confessions.
I remember one evening shortly after maternity leave and coming home from work and daycare with both girls. Zelia was about 4 months old, still figuring out how to breastfeed. Gwen was barely 2 and probably didn't like her dinner that night. They were both crying, and as I sat in my kitchen, half-dressed, trying to breastfeed with one crying kid on my lap and another crying kid in her high chair, I felt so defeated, tired. All I could do was to cry with them. At which point, my husband came home to 3 hot messes. God bless him. It wasn't the only instance that all 3 of us ended up crying together, but I'm glad to say we made it through those few tough months and things have gotten a lot easier.
Well, my daughter found a tampon in an old purse of mine, and she said, "I know what this is for. Girls put these up their butts to keep babies from falling out." When I told her what it was really for, she said, "Oh no, I'm not putting that up my chi-chi."
My daughter was 4 when she finally noticed that boys have their dad has different parts. One time we were in a sauna, taking a family sauna, and she points across at her father and says, "Papa's vagina is dumb!"
2 summers ago, my 11-year-old complained about a stomachache. We'd been suffering from a heat wave, multiple days of 95-degree or higher temperatures, so I thought he was just dehydrated from not eating and drinking enough. We were about to head to the lake to celebrate the 4th of July, and he insisted something wasn't right. But it was hot. I took him to the backyard, and I hosed him down with the garden hose, because that's what you do in a heat wave, right? Right. It wasn't long after we arrived at the lake when the vomiting started. I was still convinced it was a stomach bug, and it would pass. And our 4th of July party would go on as planned. Finally, after 13 hours of vomiting, he convinced me to take him to the emergency room. And at 5:15 a.m. on the 4th of July, he was headed into surgery for appendicitis. And I will forever go down in history as the mother who sprayed her child with a garden hose trying to cure appendicitis.
When my son was about 8 months old, he needed a tub and I needed a shower. And he enjoyed playing in the water, so I put him in his bumpo seat, you know, one of those things made for babies who can't yet sit up independently. And he played around while I took a shower. I grabbed some soap, I started scrubbing from the bottom up, and quickly discovered not only had he pooped in his seat, but I had smeared poop all over his back in the process. It was awful. Of course, I was the only one home, so no help from the husband.
My son called me babe for a solid year. Because that's what my husband calls me.
I wanted that baby so much.
I had a complete hysterectomy that removed my uterus and a baby with a healthy beating heart the night before Roe v. Wade was overturned. My partner and I had been trying to have a baby for 2 years, and when we gave up, it finally happened. We were excited but nervous. I started bleeding 3 different times and thought I was miscarrying each time. But every time they checked, it was still there, heart rate increasing. With all the early ultrasounds, they noticed that it was implanted close to my C-section scar. Things started happening very fast. And suddenly, I was sent to a specialist in Anchorage who confirmed my doctor's suspicions. It was a rare ectopic pregnancy called a C-section scar ectopic. The placenta grows into the scar tissue and ruptures the uterine wall, often in the first trimester. My HCG levels were too high to end the pregnancy with a drug called methotrexate, and a DNC would have likely punctured my bladder. So on Friday morning, my pregnant body woke up without anything in it. Sudden evacuation of a pregnancy and everything that would let me try to have another baby again. And in the midst of all the ensuing sadness, I find myself incredibly thankful to live in a time and place when this condition can not only be detected, but also that I was able to have a procedure that would save my life. Providence Hospital had to approve this through their ethics board because they are a Catholic hospital. And I am thankful that they respected the urgency of the situation. I wanted that baby so much, but I was thankful for the abortion. Waking up the morning after surgery in a hospital and watching the fall of Roe v. Wade as I cried in pain and loss. I also felt relief that my childbearing years were over as the laws changed, and I would never be forced into a situation I didn't want or that could injure me. I felt a great awareness of how lucky I was to have had my childbearing years fall in a period when women could make their own decisions regarding their pregnancy. This week I spent a lot of time crying for myself, for my partner, and for all the women who now have to make scared and furtive decisions when they are at their most vulnerable. My mind screams, how is this possible? I cannot imagine the possibility of not being able to have the extraction with Eric's pregnancy. The 2-day wait was so unsettling, I just can't. This is why I wanted to share my story. There is a need for abortions, a need for safe health care for all who can conceive. Thank you for giving me a space to share.
I woke up feeling grateful to be alive, but at 3 a.m. the sadness set in.
For 3 years, I did nothing except to give my son anything and everything that he needed to stay alive.
I am traumatized. I am tired. I am tired of ovulation sex. I am tired of the grief and disappointment of losing my babies.
Turns out there are very few people in this world who can handle being around a mother facing the grief of a dying child.
For fuck's sake, nobody likes getting an abortion.
I finally talked with my OB about getting on medication for postpartum depression and anxiety. My body feels foreign, but my baby is healthy.
I had never felt so much love as when she was placed in my arms.
You are safe with me, my babies. You are safe.
You are safe with me, my babies.
You are safe.
You are safe.
You are
You are
safe.
safe.
You are
My
safe.
babies. You are safe.
You are
You are
safe.
safe with me, my babies.
You're safe.
You are safe with me, my
You're
babies.
safe.
You're safe.
Safe with me, my
You are
babies.
safe.
You are safe with
You're
me,
safe.
my babies. You are safe. You are safe. You are safe.